Okay, well, thank you for joining us. We're going to be covering the Pandemic Virus Protection Systems project here today. This project has been going on since March of 2020 when the coronavirus pandemic started. And if you could move to the next slide. We're going to cover a basic introduction and then go into the various technical and let's say components of the system. So we're going to cover the phase shield, the filter and blower, as you see on top of this unit right here, some of the CAD work that's been going on, electronics and power, some lessons learned. Then we're going to finish up with the performance and costs and what are our next steps and challenges. So yeah, next step. So why did we do this in the first place? Well, if you think about it, workers around the world who interact with dangerous situations, they generally have tools that protect them. And unfortunately, in the case of a worldwide airborne pandemic like we had with COVID-19, our healthcare workers just didn't have the right tools. They were given surgical masks and other types of masks that really were uncomfortable. We're really not. I mean, more than uncomfortable. Caused basically bruises and other things on healthcare workers' faces. They were very difficult to use, and as a result, it's for sure some of them basically probably got COVID because of not just the comfort, but also the protection factor associated with surgical masks and N95s is not as high as it could be with other forms of basically protection. So we felt that a bunch of us felt that we should try to design something that could support healthcare workers around the world with much better protection, much easier to wear for longer periods of time. And we basically wanted to be something that could be easily mass produced so that every healthcare worker could get hold of one relatively quickly in the beginning of a pandemic. And so we got, if you go to the next slide, basically the other thing we just want to point out is that pandemics and infectious disease outbreaks happen pretty regularly, and they're happening actually with the increasing global population and air travel. They seem to be happening quicker. And so while COVID-19 is still going through hopefully the final stages, there might be still some tough waves coming. There's sure to be additional infectious disease outbreaks, and healthcare workers at different times are going to need some type of protection. So what we'd like to do is to have basically a set of designs and plans that have been tested and validated, available for the next wave or the next pandemic. And we just think it's unacceptable, of course, for healthcare workers to take the brunt of this without the right protection. So what are our goals for the PVP project, the Pandemic Virus Protection Systems project? It's basically to create what's called a PAPR, which is a powered air purifying respirator. And this would provide much better protection for healthcare workers. And we want it to be low cost and easy to mass produce. We also thought that we can't reinvent the wheel. We want to leverage commercial products where they add value, where we can get benefit from them. And we want everything to be open source so that at a time of a pandemic, anybody in the world who has access to manufacturing capabilities can literally pull the design down and start building these types of units very quickly. Now, when it comes to cost, the commercial PAPRs, there are commercial PAPRs out there, but they cost around $1,000 to $2,000, and therefore most medical staff are not able to have one. Not only that, but they're not necessarily designed to be mass produced to reach, let's say, I think in the US, 18 million healthcare workers. So basically, we're trying to rethink this so that there's plans available for basically protecting healthcare workers in the time of a pandemic. So next slide. Now, we had a lot of sub-goals. And of course, first and foremost is safety. The whole concept behind a powered air purifying respirator is that you constantly blow basically or stream in air that has been filtered, in this case with a HEPA filter, which is 99.97% effective at pulling or basically blocking coronavirus. And and that pressure, that air pressure, bathes the head of the healthcare worker and keeps the virus out. So not only that, but it keeps a nice flow of cool air flowing around the healthcare worker as they're working. So we wanted something that basically we need to be able to check for the filter's life and how often to change it. We have to have a simple flow meter like you see here for checking how well the filter is operating, whether it's been, let's say, clogged up. We need a battery indicator on the unit, so you'll see this when we use it, the battery indicator to indicate whether the battery is still effective. And, we'll talk a little bit at the end about having some basically filtering of air on the way out of the unit. But that isn't the most important of the requirements right now. There's really good visibility. It needs to have good visibility, and you can see that here. Basically, we want comfort and mobility. So this is using a hard hat basically headgear system, which is comfortable and easy to adjust to a person's head. It has to be easy to don and doff, meaning you have to be able to put it on and take it off very easily and not contaminate yourself in the process. And we chose mainly to go after this kind of integrated design where we have the filter, we have a blower, and we have a whole face shield all integrated into one, because that's the easiest to put on and put off, and also keeps everything nice and contained and easy to keep track of. We also wanted to make sure it's easy to disinfect, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But you'll see a plastic drape here, which after each use you can replace if you want, and that cuts down the amount of cleaning you have to do after a use. And and then financially, we wanted to come in under around $400. We're coming in around 300 right now, we estimate. But the more important thing is that the operating cost of the unit has to be less than an N95 solution with all the other stuff, the goggles and the simple face shields. So next slide. When it comes to the, actually one aspect of this project, which is maybe a little bit different than you see in other projects around the world, around protecting healthcare workers, is that we put a lot of time into the engineering and the science behind the work here. So of course, you don't go anywhere designing something without knowing what the technical specifications of the unit have to be. And here we're just listing them out. I won't go through them all, but basically, I think the most important thing to tell you, if you go hit next slide. Compared to an N95 mask, we feel this solution is likely to perform much better. It's probably about 100 or more times more protection than an N95 mask. And it's over the course of about 2 years using N95s for a single healthcare worker, it'll probably come in to less than a third of the cost of continuously providing N95s to healthcare staff. So we're really happy about that. We couldn't have done this without a really strong and generous group of volunteers, engineers, both here in the New York area, also in the Milwaukee area, as well as in India. And countless hours were spent by this team, and well, we obviously can't thank them enough. And the hope is that we can continue this with a growing group of engineers and scientists who want to make sure that this type of solutions is available for healthcare workers. So let's go into now the face shield, the visor, and the drape. This is the sort of the base of the whole system. So I'm just going to stand for this. The face shield was designed to have no overhangs. So you'll notice the shape of it. It comes down, and nowhere does it come inward. That's what we refer to when we have an overhang. The reason we did that is because we want this to be able to be thermoformed in one shot. So you put down a sheet of plastic, you melt it to the point where it's pliable, and then you push a mold through it, and you let it cool, and you get this shape. And because we've designed it this way, the manufacturing process is very quick and very inexpensive. It's about, we estimated, we talked to a manufacturer, and it costs about $8 to create a polyurethane instance of one of these using thermoforming. And I suspect in very high quantities, that number would get lower. So, and that can be produced very, very rapidly in again, a thermoforming factory. Sorry, it was $7 or $8. I apologize for that. But anyway, we evaluated multiple designs for this drape, which attaches here with a wire that you can see, or plastic wire. And again, this is designed so that you can protect the rest of the healthcare workers, basically shoulders and neck, and then throw it away afterwards. It's made from a roll of drum liner, 4mm drum liner, so it can be easily cut out and sealed to this shape without lots of manual processing. In fact, it can be fully automated, and it's basically a very low cost way of protecting, let's say, the top part of the healthcare worker. It could be made longer or shorter, bigger or smaller, but the idea is to have a section of it that you don't necessarily have to clean on every use. The inside of it, we have a headgear here with a 3M hard hat suspension system, and the headgear is made to fit exactly inside of this face shield, and it's got tabs in it that allow you to attach that 3M headgear, and it fits really nice and comfortable, and it doesn't touch anywhere part of the face. It's easy to use. The visor, which you see here, is meant to be replaceable, and first of all, you'll notice its shape. Its shape is a section of a cylinder. The reason for that is because we want to be able to take a plastic sheet of clear, optically clear material and cut out the shape so that a replacement, so that you can always come in and replace the sheet of visor after, let's say, some time when you may have cleaned this many times and it starts to get a little dull or difficult to see through. You want to be able to replace it. So that's why it's designed with this shape and to be replaceable. Let's see. There are tabs inside of here to be able to fit the visor in and hold it in place. This is a prototype right now. It's not fully the final version of this, but it's very close to what the final version can do. So next slide. And what we'll do now is we're going to turn it over to Bob Senzig. He's been kind of the chief, the lead engineer.
Hello. So there's 5 pieces we're going to go over. The filter, its features and performance parameters. What can we expect from a HEPA filter for coronavirus? And then what's the filter sizing considerations? What commercial filters or that are available? And then what are the flow measurements? And so I didn't know a lot about filter design. So that's where Google is your friend, and you go out and try to find information about how to do filter design. And so on the left-hand side of the screen is a NASA paper that shows that the faster you pump air through a filter, the less efficient it is. on the right, it shows where is the coronavirus compared to the performance of a HEPA filter. Now, HEPA filters are rated at 0.3 micrometer diameter. What is the performance? And you could see that the filter performs very well at those points. But it's not that it performs badly at the 0.125 micrometer that the COVID is at. And so we can expect at a very slow flow rate to get much better performance with a HEPA filter. Just for comparison, this blue line here is kind of a sneeze. It's a water droplet. And you can see that's easily taken out by the HEPA filter, and that might contain some of the virus, but the virus itself is also filtered very efficiently. So my conclusion is that a single sheet of N95 can't support the needed flow rate that we need. HEPA should be very efficient at a flow rate between 1.3 and 2.5 centimeters per second. And this can be managed with a large or pleated HEPA filter. And HEPA filters are built with high quality. They're tested a couple of times during the manufacture. And it gives us the confidence that the HEPA filter will perform very well. And on the website and here at the bottom, you can see some of the references I used to try to come up with these conclusions. Another part is to try to understand there's a couple of different dynamics in the way that a filter will filter. It's not just a sieve. And from here you can see that where the design point at 0.3 microns here is where the HEPA filter is designed for, but it actually, HEPA filters perform exceptionally well at the size of the virus. And so it's its weakness. The size of the virus is its weakness, and we're capitalizing on that. So it makes it possible to filter it with the HEPA filter very efficiently and at a speed that is not so difficult to manage with a good sized filter. So this is two different speeds that PAPRs usually perform at: 6 centimeters, 6 CFM and 8 CFM. And you can see that translation is, if you want the very best performance at 1.3, it's between, it's around a 300 square inch filter. And at the higher speed, you need more filtration to get that same level of rejection. But this is far in advance or far superior than any N95 mask. So conclusion here, obviously a filter that's square is going to be very difficult to get this square inch. We need a folded or pleated filter in order to get the surface area up to keep the speed in a good range. And we have the ability at these filter or the flow rates of 6 to 8 CFM, it's very achievable to get these filter sizes and with the appropriate blower. And so now I want to talk about our prime candidate, a Miller PAPR filter. And this is actually designed for a welding setup, but it's still rated to get rid of these particles that are this size. And these filters are fairly economical. 2-pack is $75, but if you go for a 3M filter, they're about $130 each. So this is far more economical. We chose this welding PAPR because we didn't want to compete with other systems that were using these more expensive filters, and we worried about availability. There should be no high demand for a welding filter at this point in time, even with virus raging. So we thought these would be readily available. Another filter that was very intriguing is a filter that was actually designed for a PAPR, but it was not deployed by the manufacturer. And these filters are $25 each in quantity. It's got a very good filter rating. We'll see that in a minute. And it has much better pressure drop than the Miller filter because it was designed specifically for this purpose. But the problem is that filter is really only available if we buy a huge amount of them. And that investment was unattainable for us. So we looked at the two prototypes that the manufacturer sent us, and it performed very well. And we designed a filter case around it, but we couldn't deploy it. So here's our comparison. And how did we calculate what filter size we needed with pleats? And this is a great summary that was pulled off the PAPR open source Facebook page, and it does a great job of eliminating the with a pleated filter. You could do a great job of reducing it. Down at the bottom, I have the summary of the Miller filter, this Frydenberg filter, and another much bigger Holmes filter that actually performed very well from a from a pressure drop point of view, but was a little too large for the application that we had. And so picking the Miller filter, even though its square inches is a little bit less than what ideal might be, it still is going to perform exceptionally well to eliminate the threat. One of the challenges that we had was what kind of filter or what kind of measurement are we going to use to measure our pressure? And initially we found that the pressure drop for a commercial sensor, the mechanical filter or mechanical sensor, was way too much. So we went with this electrical sensor, and it has very low pressure drop, but it's not an absolute measurement. And so we struggled with how to get an absolute measurement, and we used a 30-gallon garbage bag and a stopwatch to measure what the flow rate was. And that could be done very accurately. And so we measured the flow with the electrical flow rate and the stopwatch, and had two curves that, solving for these two equations, allowed us to come up with calibration that you see here matches very well with what we actually had. So now we can take the flow measurement from the electronic flow meter and accurately measure the CFM. And using that, we're able to optimize the blower that we need and optimize that for weight. If you look at a regular fan, it just doesn't push air with enough back pressure to be efficient here. And so this is sort of how the blower works internally. You can see the discharge here and the fan intake. Here's the GDS time, which was a candidate that we looked at, but it was a little bit heavy. And by going to a 90-millimeter fan, and this is a fan from a Dell computer, we were able to reduce the weight significantly and still get adequate flow rates for the PAPR. And so this gets the gold star and did an effective job when we ran our tests. So how did it stack up in terms of the weight? We had our original helmet design was 1,086 grams, and that's about 2 pounds 6 ounces, which is competitive with commercial units, maybe even a little lighter if you factor in the hose that's got to hang from the back. The GDS time blower was quite a bit heavier, so we took that weight reduction. But then we did some design changes to the helmet, which you'll see a little bit later, that allowed us to chop some additional weight out and end up about 903 grams, which should be a lot more comfortable and, as I said, competitive with anything commercial. So thank you for your attention.
So next up, we're going to talk about the computer-aided design area, and Jen here actually handled a lot of the design. We also have Vishwa, who handled design as well. What we're going to do is have Jen walk through basically the CAD model a little bit. So take it away, Jen.
Hi. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about specifically the Miller filter housing, which you can see on the top there, as well as on the stand there. And you can see all the parts. I helped in designing the thermoformed cover, as well as the piece that's going around the head here that helps it attach to the cover as well. So I'm gonna cut through this really quick. You can see that there's really three main parts to the filter housing. The bottom, which holds the filter, the top, which helps it secure, and a weirdly shaped piece that slides in to really help us get a good seal between the filter and its enclosure.
So now we'd like to show the Miller filter housing CAD design.
A couple of key points with it. We wanted to make it easy for people to take apart. And you can see we've got tabs on the side that we added so that you can just take it off with your hands pretty easily, and it snaps right back on. And that kind of just like generally holds the filter in place while also allowing for airflow on the sides. But then there is a third piece that you can take out. It's a little bit more difficult. Yeah, there we go. And it's a spike that pretty much just holds down the filter so we get a really good seal, which obviously is important when we're talking about airflow through a filter. So, put this back on. And another really important thing that we were thinking about when we were designing these was the ability for people to 3D print them really easily. So you can see that the sides here are flat. Obviously you'd print the top from this side facing down and the bottom from this side facing down, and that's pretty much just to allow you to print it without supports. There's no post-processing really for these pieces. So it's really easy for you to be able to download them yourself and print them yourself. And the files for this are available at GitHub repository. Oh yeah. And I will put this back in. And it slides back on, and now it's sealed down. So yeah, that's the gist of the Miller filter housing.
So the next thing to try here is to basically put it on and show you how it works when somebody's using it, or putting it on and taking it off. So what you want to do is basically take the unit and literally just drop it on. There's an adjustment in the back to adjust to your head, and there's plastic for protection of your shoulders, and then there's a belt, which I should have put on first. And basically you just turn it on. And there's a bit of noise with it, so I have to talk a little bit louder. It's a little harder to hear, but it's manageable. And the balance is good. I can look around, I can look down, I can do work with this. I can take a fast walk down a hall or do anything. I'm totally portable, and it's a good working system, but it is a prototype. Now, another important thing of using a papper is that it needs to be easy to remove. It's called the donning process. The doffing process. So I'm going to go through that process right now. And there it is. that's how the system works. One of the things that is one of the challenges associated with these PAPRs, or powered air purifying respirators, is that once you've added all of the components to a full system like this, the weight starts to become an issue. You want to keep the weight down as much as possible. So while this design is usable and workable and pretty good, we thought, well, let's experiment with some other designs that might be even lower weight and a little bit easier to wear. So, for example, this is a test we did by 3D printing an outer shell. You can see it's a lot smaller. It allows air to be pumped in from the back through a tube, and we've modified this adapter for the head and the headgear so that it fits into this nicely. And basically, it's also got the same cylindrical face shield, visor that you see there that can fit in there. And basically, it's a lot lighter to work with. So this is just another variant of design that we experimented with.
So next we'd like to review the electronics and power subsystem. This was all designed by Jim Hannes.
This is a picture of the control enclosure. It consists of two 3D printed items, the main box and the top cover. Although it is not designed for immersion cleaning, it is sealed enough to allow easy wipe down cleaning. Upon close inspection of the cover, you'll notice that there's an integral push button. Even though it uses a plastic hinge, the button only requires about 1 millimeter of operational deflection, and this should ensure long operational life. It was our intention to seal the top by applying a clear label. These early prototypes use 3M shipping tape. On the left is the silver blower cable connector. It provides a secure cable connection, but is relatively easy to connect and disconnect. The top is secured to the box with 4 stainless steel plastic screws. The battery connection circuit board shown at the bottom is secured to the box with 2 screws. This makes for a very robust connector. On the back is the belt clip shown in the center view. It's fastened to the back of the box. It is a spring steel and is painted with an epoxy paint. We use a construction grade battery that locks onto the control box using the battery's integral locking mechanism. Next slide, please. You might be wondering why we use such a large battery. One of our initial goals was to provide enough power for 10 hours of continuous use. We determined that about 4.5 watts of fan power was required to provide the user with sufficient airflow to meet the regulatory requirements. In addition, of course, there are losses in the regulation of the speed, and this results in the need for a battery that can provide about 50 watt hours of power. Originally, we were planning on using off-the-shelf USB power packs. However, many of the manufacturers of these power packs exaggerate the amount of power that the packs can provide. And in addition, much of the customer feedback of these devices showed questionable consistency, reliability, and long-term stability. Also, with using consumer products, one can never be sure of the long-term availability. That led us to looking for more robust, readily available battery packs. We settled on the Milwaukee Electric Tool Power Pack, which contains an integral battery state of charge that was mentioned earlier, a robust locking mechanism, and a strong case that can withstand accidental drops. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the control board that's inside the enclosure. The top edge, you will see a push button, which has gold-plated contacts for long-term reliability. It interfaces with the plastic lever that is part of the top enclosure. The bottom edge, you will see a gold-plated 3-pin connector, which is similar to connectors used by cell phones to connect to their batteries. Once the control board is slid down from the top and into the case, these connector springs ensure a reliable connection to the battery connector circuit board. Other items on this board are a microprocessor, a switching power supply to provide regulated adjustable blower power, a power supply for the micro, battery and blower voltage and current measurement circuits, and a 6-pin programming connector. This custom board was necessary to provide us with all of our target features. Although our first prototypes used a potentiometer, we found that it was hard to set the proper blower speed. A push button gives us the user quick access to a series of useful speed settings, and it's easier to seal against cleaning fluids. Now, over the discharge period of the battery, the 18-volt battery, the voltage drops from 21 volts when fully charged down to 14 volts when depleted. The microprocessor controls the blower regulator to provide the regulated voltage based on the selected motor speed, regardless of the battery voltage. We had many ideas for indicator LEDs or buzzers mounted inside the mask, but after considering the need for cleaning the hood inside and out, and the fact that the blower did not need to run at its maximum speed, we came up with an idea of switching back and forth from the current speed to the maximum speed as a means of signaling that the battery is low. We also included a time safety margin that allows the user a sufficient amount of time to complete the required tasks without having to immediately rush to change the battery. With many batteries, including lithium batteries, these batteries lose capacity if they are discharged below a safe level. To ensure the batteries are not damaged, the microprocessor manages the battery voltage, monitors it, and turns off the blower if the battery voltage drops down to the recommended cutoff level. When the blower cable is disconnected, we wanted to ensure that no voltage is available at the power connector during cleaning or when it's sitting on a shelf, even if the push button is accidentally pressed. And this ensures that the battery will not discharge on a shelf between uses. The microprocessor does not monitor the airflow directly. This was a very expensive option. But during testing, we determined that the motor speed increases if the fan intake is restricted. The control circuitry uses this information from the blower current to accurately determine the motor speed. By comparing the speed that is expected at each of the speed settings to the measured speed, it is possible to determine that the filter is whether the filter is blocked or dirty enough to restrict the airflow during, below the required levels. Now, however, since the blower speed can vary with different filters, there is a seal label that allows access to the 6-pin programming port on the main board, and it will accept a small memory module with capacity for all of the filter parameters. This procedure is easily accomplished by hospital maintenance personnel, and once complete, the enclosure opening is resealed with a new label. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about today.
Okay, so moving on, we'd like to discuss now just a little bit of feedback we got on the system. So we did we did contact 2 physicians in the local area here. They reported that they were using N95 masks and surgical masks while giving care to their patients. And they were, at the time we asked, they were receiving, basically, they were using 1 N95 mask per week, which is a long ways to go with 1 N95 mask. They also reported they had difficulty breathing through N95s after a couple hours of use. So they really preferred, I guess, surgical masks at times. But I think they were looking also for protection as well that the N95s provide over the surgical masks. When they were shown a series of PVP prototypes, you can see on the bottom right a table with about 1, 2, 3, 4, actually it's 4 different types of designs. We're not going to go over all the different designs, but you can see on the bottom right a backpack, which you put on and it blows air through a tube into your enclosure here. We also had 2 different mounts, 2 different mounting methods. One where the filter was on top of the head, which is the design we've been showing, but also one where it's more toward the back of the head. So they both the physicians said they would prefer wearing a PVP protection device over masks, over N95 masks and goggles and all the other things. One said though that that having this type of technology was amazing. He felt it would be a great improvement over, again, where they are now with N95s. Both preferred the filter and the blower being positioned over the head. I think from a balance point of view, that's an easier thing to work with. And they emphasized that they only need, the reason why actually they preferred this design over the backpack is that they only need this type of protection, this level of protection, when they're in an encounter for a short period of time generally. So they'll walk into a patient's room and they'll who's possibly exposed and or has COVID, and they'll do what they need to do, and they'll get out in 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes. So overall, the reviews were quite positive, and they did identify a couple issues though. One was, there is noise in the face shield during operation, and they felt that it was a little too high. It would be better if it was lower, but it is usable as it is. And they also felt that when you wear an N95 mask, the mask itself filters air coming in, but it also filters air going out. And the thought was that in order to use this, it would be better to have the air being filtered on the exit. Now, commercial PAPRs don't do this, or most of them don't do this. So we view this as an additional feature we'd like to consider adding to the system. And overall, again, the feedback was quite positive and encouraging. So now we'd like to discuss very quickly just a few of the lessons learned along the way. We're really just scratching the surface of all the work that's gone on and all the variants and ideas that were explored during this process. It really is the tip of an iceberg. But one of the things that we learned relatively early is to whenever taking on a project like this, evaluate with mock-ups early and iterate quickly. And we kind of got stuck on some designs for probably longer than we should have. But overall, we did pretty well in the time we had, which was rather short. we came up, I think, with a pretty good design. 3D printing is also a tremendous benefit. And so you can see that we designed, for example, this headgear adapter. I don't know if you can see this video, but let's pop out and I'll show it to you for a second. So this is the headgear adapter. This is 3D printed. It's got a low infill. So at the end of the day, this is a very lightweight object. So we designed something that actually not only functionally works, but is in the weight category it needs to be. This is the 3M headgear headgear suspension system. It's got tabs on it and it fits, we made it so that it fits directly inside of here. This is a resource that other people investigating PAPRs can explore, and basically the CAD files for all of this are available, openly available on our GitHub account repository.
Yeah, so Rick, by using these off-the-shelf components like the headgear suspension, 3M's done a lot of engineering to design that, and the adjustment and all the things associated with it. We get to leverage that at a pretty good price. Those are fairly inexpensive. So by using this adapter to our helmet and using a commercial suspension, we save a lot of engineering time and get to market or get it deployed more quickly.
Yeah, and I believe these are mass produced already. So they're in
Right.
a hardware store around the world.
I think that's like $8 or something like that.
Yeah, it's very low cost. Okay, so we'll go back to sharing the screen. And the other big thing we learned along the way is to pay very close attention to weight and weight distribution. We started off looking at lots of ideas and things that turned out to have just too much weight associated with them. And lots of CAD designs were made. We have piles of 3D printed objects that we're never going to use. But it was a good learning experience. And if we had to do it over again, we'd focus in on weight very early on the project. And then finally, noise. And it turns out that it's easy to underestimate the challenges of managing noise. You know, I thought originally that if we just put some anti-vibration pads and or blow in air from a backpack, that we would avoid the noise. But when you blow in air from a backpack, you also blow in, or you bring in noise, and the noise propagates down the air tubes. Anyway, noise is a major challenge. It needs to be considered very carefully. And I think with a bit more engineering and time on this, we can bring the noise down even lower. As far as I can tell, based on ratings of other PAPRs, this one with the design that you see here is very competitive, if not potentially better than the existing commercial PAPRs. So
We'd like to do better.
What's that?
We'd like to do better. That's why it's on our list.
Absolutely. Okay, now we'd like to talk a little bit about the performance of the system and the cost. And for that, we're not going to go through the spreadsheets of cost roll-ups and other things, and how we estimated the protection factors. But just as a rule of thumb, an N95 mask has what's called an assigned protection factor of around 10. And a typical PAPR generally operates with an assigned protection factor of around 1,000 or more. So we expect this unit to operate in the PAPR range over 1,000. And so we expect that this would be just roughly around 100 times more protective than a mask. And of course, a mask is only protecting you in the region of the mask. This is protecting a much bigger area and volume. Of course, what we need to do next is to do independent testing of the units with, we have some tests that we've been conducting or have planned to conduct, but yeah, a full suite of independent testing is needed on this. In terms of cost, we conservatively estimate that to manufacture this at a decent volume, it'll be about a $300 cost to create that. So if you imagine that another surge of a pandemic were to occur and governments were to get involved and basically have factories pump these types of things out, I suspect it would be lower than we estimate, but around $300 is what we expect this to come in at. And then the operational cost. If you were to operate this with, again, most of this is reusable, and the part that isn't reusable, the drape, is very, very low cost. It's plastic liner. So over 2 years, we estimate that a PVP unit is about a 1/3 to 1/4 the cost of N95s and goggles, simple shields. And again, we've got all those calculations, and I'd be happy to share them with anybody who wants them. So overall, from a protection point of view and from my cost point of view, having a design like this available for future pandemics, having it on the shelf and ready to go, it not only will give better protection, but potentially save countries and institutions a lot of money. The challenges and next steps. So we talked a little bit about exit filtration. I mentioned earlier, the biggest feedback we received is that we need to address filtering the air on the exit, and especially there was a news story that somebody wore, I think it was something like a dino costume, which was an air-filled one, and the person was suspected to have had COVID, and they spread COVID very effectively with that. So we don't want to have any headlines with this type of solution. So we are looking at potentially adding a filter on the exit and a small fan, and I'll just show you one example of a small fan. This is a small Wathai fan that you can see here. Actually, it's pretty tiny, but if we can get the airflow, the cubic feet per minute at the bottom of the enclosure and have a filter, then we can effectively push out the air and filter it on the way out. The other thing I want to point out, maybe not obvious with respect to PAPR designs, is you don't want to have a lot of volume in a PAPR. And the reason why is because you tend to build up CO2. And so adding this to this fan to filter out any coronavirus or other pathogens, any other diseases on the way out, not only will help clear the air and not spread disease, but it will help pull out any CO2 that builds up inside of this. And if you see other PAPR designs out there and they've got big, either bubbles or other things, if they just let a person breathe in there, even if they're flowing air through it, you can get a big buildup of CO2, and that's not good for the healthcare worker. So let's go back now to sharing the screen. So just final thoughts on exit filtration. No commercial systems that we're aware of do this, but it could be a big advantage. And as I said, we're working on it. Whoops. Okay, comfort and weight. Feedback was positive. Weight is similar than other commercial PAPRs. We've talked a little bit about the noise, but we're at adequate levels right now. We've reduced the weight, and we talked about chopping down the design. Actually, if you could hand me the
Rick, the page hasn't flipped.
What's that?
There it is. Nothing. The page hadn't flipped,
Oh,
but
okay.
it has now.
Okay, so yeah, we talked about chopping down the design, and what you see here is an example of this. This is a quick prototype we did. We 3D printed out this shell. We modified the adapter. You can see a hose attachment in the back, just a quick hose attachment in the back, and basically the idea is to really cut down the weight of the helmet, expose the ears a little bit more. So the drape would come here, but you could access your ears perhaps, and you can really experiment with different design concepts like this. And so we're going to come back to these types of designs and see if we can make this both lower weight and lower cost. And then noise-wise, we have investigated isolation headphones and microphones that you can wear in a full audio system. One problem with all that is that it adds cost to the final solution. So that's a whole other area that needs to be investigated. And also, we'll probably wind up lowering the size of the battery because it does weigh a little bit more than is easy to manage, and the life of the battery is probably higher than it needs to be for most healthcare workers. But yeah, we have some work to do in that area. We talked a little bit about noise a little earlier. This is an example of wireless earbuds that are noise canceling, but they're again expensive, $228. So that kind of blows our budget a little bit there. But you can connect with a smartphone and other things, an electronic stethoscope, so you don't have to have wires coming out of the unit here to. I'm sorry, a stethoscope tube coming out of the unit here to make contact with the patient. You can use electronics, but again, all of these things add cost. So that's the whole project. Wow, we went through a lot of material. We didn't cover everything we could, but I think we got the main things. Any final thoughts, Jim, Bob, Vishwa, Jen?
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of points. So one of the thing is that we went with some of the standard parts that is readily available for the hardware across, right? So that is critical from the the supply chain and things like that, right? It should be readily available. It should be standard parts, the fasteners or the O-rings or any the sealing that what we do with the filter case to the head shell. So those parts are readily available in McMaster car, and it's a standard parts, and anywhere in the globe you can find it. And the solution is so unique and so low cost that you can use anywhere across the globe. So that is one good advantage of this this idea.
Yeah, Vishal, that was great that you could specify the hardware that we needed, and it was readily available through McMaster and other companies. But since they're a global company, that made it really easy to get those parts. They came very quickly.
Right.
Well, a couple more things just to discuss. We had a lot of help along the way. The Tech Valley Center of Gravity did some early experiments with us using their equipment to do thermoforming, and then they put us in contact with Ecovative, which is I guess a design company in the biology area, but they had a thermoforming unit which was used and it came out great. We worked with them. They helped us create the mold. They created the molds from our designs, and we also had help from 3Lane Marketing to create the website, and there were various other groups and individuals, the physicians who evaluated. So you know, it's really important to recognize the groups that were out there. And then lastly, I just want to point out that we're always looking for collaborators. We feel, again, we need to be ready, much better, ready for the next viral pandemic or viral outbreak. And so if you're interested, please contact us at open-pvps@paraxialtech.org. We'll add the email address to the video.
Yeah, it's great. Great close, Rick. It's been really wonderful working with all the engineers that volunteered and participated in this program, and it worked out I think very well, and we've got a good, solid design concept here that we want to take to deployment.
Great. Okay, well, thank you all, and we'll be back with more developments hopefully soon. Take care.
Thank you.